Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Spirit of Liberty broadcast. Appreciate you joining me live today. Hope everyone had a Merry Christmas and hope everyone has a great New Year. This is the last, I always forget to mute my thing so I can watch a live chat, but it's good to hope everyone has a great New Year. And it's hard to believe 2022 is almost over, but definitely wish the best for everybody. Hope you have a great New Year and hope you get a blessing from the program. Today, we're going to talk about the poison of the tongue. Now, again, if you're new to this broadcast, these are geared towards men mainly, and obviously there's probably some things ladies can learn from in a lot of these, but I try to gear these things towards men and just try to be a help to them, speak to them a way that I would my sons, and just trying to prepare men to be successful, to be good Christians. And I do believe one of the things that can set you up for success or failure is how you speak and the language that you use. We live in a very sick, perverted world today where profanity is just a regular part of people's vocabulary. I mean, it's just absolutely disgusting and filthy, the words that come out of people's mouths, the things that people will talk about, and there's just no filter at all on people's mouths anymore. And thankfully, I was raised different. I was taught to, not only not use certain words, but, to be respectful, to look people in the eye and, and to speak clearly. Don't mumble. You've got teenagers that they mumble everything and you can't understand what they're saying. And I'm telling you, if you have a practice of that, just not being good at communicating, not speaking clearly, it's going to affect you in your job. If depending on what field you go into, there are some jobs where communication is very important. Your ability to speak, to communicate, to speak clearly, to have a good personality, those things are really going to matter. If you're in sales and you're just mumbling to people, acting like a jerk, you just have no charisma about you, you're going to struggle in that area. And, and also too, if you're just somebody and you're just, you have no filter on your mouth, you see somebody and, I'm just speaking the truth, but sometimes you don't have to always speak the truth. If somebody's ugly, there's no reason for you to tell them that. If someone is overweight, you don't need to point that out when talking to them. Have a filter on your mouth. And the Bible talks a lot about the tongue. And it is something that, while it can be used for good, it is something that in a much easier way can be used for evil. And we're going to talk about the poison of the tongue. And we're specifically going to talk about words and language because, again, the words you use, how you speak, the expressions you use say a lot about you. Just like you can often tell if someone is from the North or the South or, if certain parts of the world based on an accent or even just based on the words that they use. If somebody's like, I'm fixing to go get something to eat, I think they're probably from the South because they use the word fixing. And, there's a lot of different things like that, not just accents, but actual words. And there's ways that a saved person will typically talk. A lot of times, saved people, Christians, we use a lot of biblical terms that, our world does not use that often. There are words that are more familiar to us. How often do you hear in the workplace amongst lost people, them talking about repentance? I mean, and repentance is a change of mind. People change their mind on things all the time. But, if somebody was like, I was going to go buy this car, but I repented and, decided not to. People don't really do that, do they? But that would make sense. But if you did hear someone say that, you're thinking this is probably a more religious person. This person probably reads their Bible. Sometimes we'll put F's at the end of our words, maybe. And typically when we do that in our normal speech, we're probably being funny, but, it'll tell you something. So again, when somebody is, the words they use, when somebody is using profanity, it tells us some things about them. And, listen, I've been around for a long time. I've heard the arguments against this idea of there being such a thing as bad words. There's no such thing as cussing. that is absolutely ridiculous. There are words that we should not use as Christians, and people are like, well, you got to give, all of a sudden they go into stupidity and start demanding you give a Bible verse that shows a prohibition on that specific word. But at the same time, if that word was in the Bible saying not to say it, then you'd say, well, that's in the Bible, therefore it's the words of God, and the words of the Lord are pure words. Therefore, I can say them however I want, whenever I want, whatever context I want. And so, anybody who is just being honest, they will not have any trouble understanding right or wrong in this issue. Some people want to be contentious, and that's fine. We know what to do with those people. Typically, you just, you avoid them. You withdraw yourself. But let's go ahead and let's see what the Bible says on this subject, specifically on cussing, okay? Well, specifically on cussing, because people will say, you can't show me a verse that says thou shalt not cuss. And I love how we move the goalpost on things, where, you call somebody out for cussing and then they demand you show a Bible verse that gives a certain specific thing. No, I called you out for cussing. Cussing's bad. And I don't have to show a verse that says the words this way and in this order. Sometimes the Bible words things differently. Sometimes it uses other words that are synonyms, and therefore it is, in fact, in the Bible. Just because I'm not going to be able to go on eSword and search that phrase and find a verse doesn't mean it's not there. So let's go ahead and see what the Bible says on this subject. So we'll start in James 3 and verse 1. It says, my brethren, be not many masters, knowing we shall receive the greater condemnation. For in many things we offend all. If any man offend not in word, the same is a perfect man, and able also to bridle the whole body. As Christians, we should make an attempt, and we should be able to not offend in word. Okay. Now, I already know the arguments that people scream when they hear you say these things. All right. I know that you all are well aware of exceptions on certain things. Okay. And never allow someone who is promoting wickedness to distract you from the actual argument by just bringing up facts that are basically unrelated and don't change the reality of what we're actually talking about. Okay. But as Christians, there's a lot of verses, challenging us to not offend people, to not be offensive. And our speech should not be offensive. And if you are able to bridle that tongue to where you're not offending people with your speech, you're somebody, you have some self-control. You're able to control your whole body. And I get it. A lot of people, they struggle with this. I was blessed. I grew up in a home where, cussing was not acceptable at all. And so, I was trained from a very young age. And, I don't brag when I say that I don't cuss. And I've never, the only cussing that I'm familiar with that I've ever done, my parents have a story my dad would always tell about when I was a little kid. I was going around with another kid saying a cuss word at church, and somebody in the church came to my dad and it's like, did you know that your son is saying whatever? And I didn't even know what the word meant. And my dad had to come and get on me and tell me, and I vaguely remember this, but to honest, to this day, I don't remember what the word was that I said. But I do remember getting in trouble for saying something. I even remember the friend that I was with saying it. But at the same time, my dad he just told me, he's like, when you hear a word and you don't know what it means, don't use it, or ask me about it first. And I'm thankful, so my parents nipped that thing early. And so, it would be very unnatural for me to cuss. I would have to force it out. And I think we ought to have patience on people who maybe did it for years and years. And it's a hard, nasty habit to overcome. I'll be patient, but I'm not going to tell them it's okay. Yeah, you did it, but you need to stop, because this kind of thing is not acceptable. My dad, I remember too, my dad, I used to just I would get scared when I would hear anyone cussing, because my dad was probably going to confront him, confront them. And he did many times. I remember one time in a barber shop, we were sitting in there and I'm getting my hair cut and this guy's in there talking to the barber and he's just, F this and F that and just dropping all these F bombs. And my dad, he just got up out of his chair. He walked over to that guy and he said, "You need to stop that right now." He's like, "My son is sitting right there. I don't want him hearing that." And boy, that guy shut up. And a lot of times too, understand a lot of people who use profanity, it's something that they feel like they need to do to make them look tough, feel tough, because they are not tough. And I've only ever had, with people I confronted, like one person that didn't just like completely back down. I had a situation one time, I remember I was in a restaurant. There were these guys in there just dropping profanity here and there and everywhere. And I had my kids in there. And I thought about my dad. I was like, I need to be the same. I just walked over to those guys and I said, "Listen, my little kids are here." I had 3 small kids at the time. And I said, "I don't want them hearing that kind of language. You need to stop." And I remember I walked, I went, sat back down at the table and we ate our food. It was real quiet in there. Everybody was real tense. And then I remember I'm taking the kids out to the car. I'm loading them all up in the car. And then these guys, they come walking out of the restaurant and one comes walking up to me like he's going to confront me. And I remember I finished buckling the kids in and I just turned around and I just looked right at him like, "You have something to say?" And then he just like stopped dead in his tracks, turned around and walked away. And so again, a lot people too, especially who use profanity in such inappropriate settings, in restaurants, in public places, around kids, around ladies. These people, they have to compensate for just the weakness of themselves and who they are. And it makes them feel tough or bold or whatever by saying things like that. And, I see right through that stuff and I'm not impressed. Not only are you not scaring me, you're revealing your weakness and only emboldening me even more to confront you. And so I did have one time, I remember when I worked at McDonald's, I would talk to my coworkers and I was always nice. I was like, "Listen, I'd appreciate if you wouldn't use that kind of language around me. At least make an effort." And most of them would, but I remember there was this one guy, man, this dude was scary. He was one of these just freaky looking dudes. He had his girlfriend's arm like carved to his arm and like his bicep area. He like took a razor blade and cut her name in his arm. It had this nasty scar. I mean, it was that big. And I remember one time I told him, I was like, "Listen, I'd appreciate if you wouldn't talk that way around me." And he just looked at me and he just said, "Well, you better get used to it because I'm not going to stop." And you know what? I believed him. And you know what? He didn't stop. Thankfully, he eventually got fired for throwing knives. And don't know whatever happened to that dude. But again, I've never had a tolerance for that kind of thing. I have no respect for people who use profanity. I will be kind to people who maybe got saved later in life and are struggling. I'll be patient with those people, but you do need to get over it. And especially as a Christian, because we are not to be offensive. And there are many words that are offensive. 1 Corinthians 10, when speaking specifically about trying to reach people, Paul said in verse 31, "Whether therefore ye eat or drink or whatsoever you do, do all to the glory of God, give none offense, neither to the Jews, nor to the Gentiles, nor to the church of God, even as I please all men in all things, not seeking mine own profit, but the profit of many, that they may be saved." So right there, Paul's like, I'm trying to please everybody. Why? Because I want to get people saved, and I'm not going to distract them by what I eat. I don't want to distract somebody because of words that I say. I want them to hear the gospel. Now, what a person whose mouth is full of guile will do when you bring this kind of thing up is then they will run to the scriptures talking about how the gospel is an offense, how Jesus Christ is a rock of offense. And they'll go to all those scriptures, know all those scriptures, very well aware of those things. But listen, if somebody gets offended by the Bible, it's not me that offended them. Okay. It's God that offended them. Okay. People, they don't hate us. There's people out there, they hate Jesus Christ. And so because of what we represent, they often have hatred for us. So if that's people's problem with me, is they don't like the Jesus only salvation, Well, understand that's not me offending them. Okay. That's the gospel offending them. So again, there's a massive difference between someone getting offended because I preach the gospel to them, I preach the truth of the scriptures to them, and someone getting offended because I lost my temper and I used filthy language. Those are not even in the same ballpark. They do not compare. Those whose mouths are full of guile, they will bring that up when trying to defend an unbridled tongue. And that doesn't work. Anybody with half a brain can see right through that. So we should make a real attempt to not offend people. If we care about people, we're not going to want to offend them. Okay. You don't want to offend somebody that you care about. You don't want to offend somebody you love. If you're trying to reach your grandma, if you're trying to reach your parents, you're going to be careful about how you speak because you don't want to offend them. Now, you're not going to change the gospel because you understand that will not help them. They're not going to get saved. If your Catholic grandma is going to get offended because, you say that salvation is only through Jesus Christ and can't be obtained through Mary, you understand you have to say that. You absolutely have to, because you can't get her saved while she's trusting in Mary. But at the same time, if you tell her that and she gets offended, you didn't offend her, the gospel offended her. Okay? But if you are just using all kinds of profanity, she got offended by you. So don't try to put those things in the same category. The Bible says in Colossians 4:5, walk in wisdom toward them that are without, redeeming the time. Let your speech be always with grace, seasoned with salt, that ye may know how ye ought to answer every man. I need to be careful about how I speak. I need to have grace in my speech. I need to season it with salt. Right? Because I want to make a difference in people's lives. And so if I am being offensive for the sake of being offensive, well, then I'm not accomplishing anything. In fact, I'm sinning at that point, because that's me being offensive. That's me doing that. That is not. But if I'm just preaching the Bible and someone gets offended, that's the Bible offending them. And there's nothing I can do about that. Can't do a thing about that. So we do, but we naturally know how to answer people we love and get along with. And we should always talk to others like you would your parents or your family. And so taking a stand against something like this, taking a stand against literally any sin, it will always get you labeled a holier-than-thou and a Pharisee. Okay, that's straight out of the playbook. It's an old playbook, and it's absolutely ridiculous. People who will accuse someone of being a holier-than-thou because they don't believe in using vulgarity and profanity don't even know what a holier-than-thou is. Okay, and watch out too. That person whose mouth is full of guile. We're going to talk more about that in a little bit. When they try to attach a sin to you, and they'll use biblical phrases, they'll use biblical terms like holier-than-thou because it's in the Bible. And so I'm just preaching the Bible. Okay. But let's make sure if we call someone a holier-than-thou, that we're using it in the same context or the same way that the Bible did. Now, let's look at where that term comes from, and let's see what an actual holier-than-thou is. Isaiah 65:1 says, I am sought of them that asked not for me. I am found of them that sought me not. I said, behold me unto a nation that was not called by my name. Now, folks, there's no question about how to interpret that passage right there, because the Apostle Paul talked about it in the New Testament. The Gentiles found salvation when they weren't looking for it. But the very people that God had called to salvation, that God prepared the covenants for, were rejecting it. And the Gentiles were finding it before the Jews. And so he says, I have spread out my hands all the day unto a rebellious people, which walketh in a way that was not good after their own thoughts. A people that provoketh me to anger continually to my face, that sacrificeth in gardens and burneth incense upon the altars of brick, which remain among the graves and lodge in monuments, which eat swine's flesh, and broth of abominable things is in their vessels, which say, okay, this is talking about the Jews, and they're saying this to the Gentiles. This is prophetic. This is exactly what they did in the New Testament when Jesus came, which say, stand by thyself, come not near to me, for I am holier than thou. These are a smoke in my nose and a fire that burneth all the day. So understand the holier-than-thous were people, one, who weren't saved and who were rejecting a people who did get saved. You have the Gentiles who did have a different way of life than what the Jews did. And the way the Jews lived was a lot better, closer to the Bible than the Gentiles that were eating, that were idolatrous, eating meat sacrificed to idols, committing fornication. And they had a lot of problems. But those Gentiles believed on Christ. Those Gentiles received salvation. And we see in the Bible that the Jews, they did not like seeing Gentiles being accepted by other Jews who were saved. They wanted to separate themselves from them. And so you had a people who weren't even saved looking at a group of people who did get saved and saying, you stay away from me. I'm holier than thou. Okay. So that's what a real holier than thou is. So now obviously you can make application, with something like that. It doesn't have to be that exact same situation, but at the same time, here's how I think you could be a holier than thou today is when somebody comes and they get saved, but a church maybe rejects them because they've just got too much baggage. Okay. That's not good. Maybe they're all tattooed up. Maybe they still, look freakish like the world. And even though that person is saved, even though that person is repentant, you're still going to reject them. And that's the thing. These Gentiles, they were repentant. They did believe on Christ. They found salvation, even though they hadn't been looking for it. And yet they were rejected by a bunch of Jews who thought they were better than everybody else and at the same time weren't saved. So the thing is, as a Christian, we should always be forgiving. We should always accept people who are wanting to come back in the fold, people who are repentant. We should forgive 70 times 7. And when we won't do that because they're sinning too much, that's when you're a holier than thou. But when you're calling out unrepentant sin, that's not being a holier than thou. Okay? A church, when they have to remove someone from the church because of sin, that church is not being a holier than thou. Now, if that person repents of their sin and the church still won't let them come back because they have defiled themselves somehow, some girl committed fornication and therefore she's defiled, she's never allowed back in membership of the church. Now, that's being a holier than thou. Calling out sin, calling out any sin is not being a holier than thou, okay? You're being gaslit when people bring that kind of thing up, when they go to that passage to call out somebody who's just taking a stand against sin. And you ought to be able to see right through that kind of thing. So again, most people who say holier than thou don't even know what one is. Let's use Bible terms the way the Bible uses them. So James 3:3 says, behold, we put bits in the horses' mouths that they may obey us and turn aside their whole body. Behold also the ships, which though they be great and are driven of fierce winds, yet are they turned about with a very small helm, whithersoever the governor listeth. Even so the tongue is a little member and boasteth great things. Behold how great a matter a little fire kindleth. Oh, you people, you're making such a big deal about a word, about a combination of letters in the alphabet. You make such a big deal about words. Well, yeah, because words can do a lot of damage. Words can start a lot of fires. And it's just something from the tongue. I mean, you're saying what somebody did with their tongue is so bad. Yes, it's a fire. It's a world of iniquity. And so is the tongue among our members, that it defileth the whole body and is set on fire the course of nature and is set on fire of hell. For every kind of beast and of birds and serpents and of things in the sea is tamed and hath been tamed of mankind, but the tongue can no man tame. It is an unruly evil full of deadly poison. And don't let anybody tell you that it's impossible to control your tongue based on this verse. No, I can't tame someone else's tongue. Okay. I might be able to tame a horse. I might be able to tame some other animal, but I'm not going to be able to tame someone else's tongue. Okay. But that doesn't mean you can't tame your tongue. That doesn't mean you can't get it under control. And because it goes on here to say that, man, this thing of blessing and cursing out of the same mouth, it shouldn't be. Okay. And it's true. A Christian should not be cussing. A Christian should not be cursing. And I know you want your verse for that, and we're about to see it. And so it says, therewith bless we God, even the Father, and therewith curse we men, which are made after the similitude of God. Out of the same mouth proceedeth blessing and cursing. My brethren, these things ought not so to be. Doth the fountain send forth at the same place sweet water and bitter? Can a fig tree, my brethren, bear olive berries, either a vine of figs? So can no fountain both yield salt water and fresh. So here we go. All right, it says blessing and cursing. That shouldn't be coming out of your mouth. And I know the guile methods. I know the gaslighting methods, okay? Let's all pretend we're smart for a couple minutes, all right? Let's not be stupid for 2 minutes here, okay? Because this passage could be more clear. Out of the same mouth shouldn't come blessing and cursing. This passage is very clear, but when you bring it up to some foul-mouthed individual, then you know what they're going to do? They're going to gaslight you. No, you're wrong. You're crazy. Jesus cursed people. David prayed imprecatory prayers. So if you got a problem with me cursing, you have a problem with cursing, you've got a problem with Jesus. You got a problem with the Bible. The Bible's full of cursing. You ever heard anybody use a method like that? Okay. Listen, it is amazing the way what some people will let individuals do to them, and through just gaslighting, manipulation tactics. And you don't see through these things because you don't want to see through them. But let's think about this a little bit, because there are some things that are very serious, and these things aren't hard to figure out when it's right and wrong to do. Okay, so for example, would you be mad at me if I made a real general statement, and I said you shouldn't go around killing people? It's wrong to go around killing people. Okay, now, would you think that I'm a terrible person for saying that? Okay. But at the same time, when I'm saying you don't go around killing people, that doesn't mean I can't shoot an intruder. It doesn't mean I can't defend myself. It doesn't mean that if I go fight in a war, I'm saying you can't try to kill the enemy. I'm not saying that. Often when we speak, this is just how we are in our world and in language, is we don't always speak in a super precise way. We often speak in a more general way, dealing with common situations. And so the thing is, when I'm saying don't go around killing people, no intelligent person is going to think, he thinks even if you're fighting a war, you just got to sit there and let the enemy take over. I'm not saying that at all, but that's what people will do. All right. To just try to, cast doubt on the person who's making a whole lot of sense. Because you know what? You shouldn't go around killing people. And listen, you shouldn't go around cursing people. You shouldn't do that. You shouldn't go around cursing people. Okay? And again, Jesus cursed people. But again, so we're gonna look at when it's appropriate and when it's not. And you're gonna find out that what people do, it doesn't even resemble what Jesus did. It's not even in the same ballpark as what Jesus did. They are distracting to justify sin and to justify wickedness. And so when speaking on subjects like this, the guilty individuals who are in sin always turn to foolishness real fast. And so if I say, that I don't like someone or I don't want to be around someone because they have a filthy mouth and they use curse words all the time, okay? The guilty party, then you wouldn't like Jesus. Jesus said the word hell. Jesus talked about damnation. Jesus cursed people. Okay? And again, they're saying that because they are a wicked person with guile in their mouth. Now, 1 Peter 3:10 says, "For he that will love life and see good days, let him refrain his tongue from evil and his lips that they speak no guile." Okay? And what is guile? Exactly. It's in the definition we see here, it's a trick. That is, it's craft, deceit, guile, subtlety. Okay? You can use your words in a way that are tricky. You can play games with words. You can say things in a way where you're not really saying something, but you are saying it. You can say things in a way where you're misleading, but you're not technically lying. That is guile right there. And teenagers are often the best at this kind of thing, like where, you'll ask them if they did something. And if you don't, word that question exactly right, they act like it's okay to just deny it. And it's like, there's a mess in the bathroom, but maybe there's two messes in the bathroom. So did you make that mess in the bathroom? And then they'll say no. Like, I got caught you on video doing it. Oh, I thought you were talking about this other mess. It's like, you knew what I was talking about. You were misleading. And that's guile right there. When you're misleading people with your words, trying to keep them away from truth, then you are deceptive. You are using guile. That is another sin that you can do with your mouth. And it is a very wicked thing to do. We shouldn't have guile in our mouth. And so when someone is demanding that you show them a verse that says, thou shalt not cuss, okay, they are speaking with guile in their mouth. When they say that, it can't be a sin to cuss because sin is a transgression of the law, and there's no verse that says thou shalt not cuss. Okay, that person is either being ignorant or they are deceiving you. Okay, and let me show you why. Because first off, okay, and again, people have tried to tell me that cussing's not a sin because the Bible doesn't say anything about cussing. It's like, do you even know what that word means? Do you even know where that word comes from? And again, there's such a thing as synonyms. Okay? And just because the Bible maybe doesn't use the same word that we use to explain something does not mean the Bible does not speak about that subject. Okay? And if you just look up the word cuss, all right, it just means, one definition is a troublesome person or animal, but it's a vulgar pronunciation of curse. That's what it is. It's a shortening or it's a slang sense of the word. In the literal sense, it's a curse. Okay, that's what a cuss word is. It's a curse word. They're the same thing. That's just a way people used to say it. It says it's a vulgar pronunciation of the word curse. According to the one dictionary I looked at, or the etymology of the word, it comes from 1848. You can't find the word cuss in the Webster's 1828 dictionary. The word cuss isn't going to be in your King James Bible. They didn't have that word in 1611, but they did have the word curse. Okay, curse was in the Bible, and there are such a thing as curse words. Absolutely, there's such a thing as curse words. Another definition for cuss is to say bad words, use profane language, a vulgar pronunciation of curse. Okay, so it says to cuss someone out is to cuss someone out. So if you just start throwing curses at somebody, you are cussing. You are cursing. Just like if I say, "Hey, have a good day, brother." You know what that is? That's a blessing. That's good. It's good to say something like that. Have a nice day. Those are blessings that we say to people. And while we should do things like that, while we should throw blessings out of our mouth, according to James, we're not supposed to have blessing and cursing coming out of our mouth. I mean, that's really clear. Now, don't do like people do. Like if I say you shouldn't go around killing people. We're all aware of warfare. We're all aware of self-defense. Okay. Obviously, I'm not speaking super precise when I say that. And probably what I should be saying is don't do murder. Okay. But I think everybody knows what I'm talking about. Okay. So, don't do the same thing when it comes to cursing, because again, I'm speaking in a general sense here. Like I would say if I said don't kill people. I'm not being real specific yet. And I say it's bad to curse people. Don't go cursing people. Okay? So, I love the fact that I just know people are melting down in their minds hearing some of these things. But don't worry, we're going to get to you. Okay, I like to let people think on these things for a little bit so they can see just how twisted their minds are later and how wrong they are. Because again, these things they're not complicated. So another term, curse word, it's a word that is a vulgarity. And a definition of curse is to utter a wish of evil against one, to imprecate evil upon, to call for mischief or injury, to fall upon, to execrate. And I love that definition too, because I know you all know that word, imprecate. I mean, we've got our professional imprecatory prayer warriors out there. But the Bible does in the Webster's 1828, it uses Romans 12:14 where it says bless and curse not. So right here, we see we're not supposed to be cursing people. And I know you want to accuse me of not liking Jesus and not liking David. We're going to get to that, okay? But before we do, let's talk about, just because I want y'all to just stew on this for a little bit. Because again, what I'm saying makes so much sense. Okay, there's no denying anything that I'm saying here. But I'm letting the rebellion just stew in you right now. So hopefully you can see the rebellion and get it right. But let's talk about biblical cussing or cursing for a minute, okay? So, because first off, most of the biblical cuss words are words that have to do with cursing. Okay? So if you're using biblical words to curse someone, but you don't have the authority to curse them, you know what? You're sinning when you use those words. Okay? You cursed, you cussed, and you had no right to do that. You had no ability to do that. If I'm going around and I'm telling people to go to hell when I don't have the authority or the ability to send someone to hell, then I am cursing them. I'm wishing evil upon them. That is the very definition of cursing. I don't have that ability to do that. Now, there's a big difference in me telling someone to go to hell, wishing someone will go to hell, than me just telling someone the truth or warning them and letting them know that they are on their way to hell. That's a big difference. In fact, typically when you warn somebody that they're on their way to hell, that's not done with any malice in your heart. That's usually done out of love and care for the individual so they can be saved. But again, what if they're a reprobate? Then it's okay, right? Well, why cast your pearls before swine if that's the case? I think you just have a nasty mouth and a nasty heart, and you just really need to tell somebody off, for whatever, if that person's a reprobate, guess what you accomplished? Nothing. Because again, you don't have any authority. Nothing that you said made it happen. Oh, Elisha cursed those kids. Yes. And guess what happened? 2 she-bears came and took care of them. You know why? Because he had power. He had authority. And God honored his curse that he put on them. But yours? How come you got these people out there, they're cursing people all the time, but nothing ever happens to them like they say in their curses? Let me tell you, when Jesus cursed people, it happened. When Elisha cursed people, what he said happened. You just throw out cursings all the time on everybody. And then something accidentally happens to one person and you think, I got the power of God. Well, what about the other 90,000 people that nothing happened to? Okay? You don't have the power of God. Okay. You don't have the authority. And so again, yeah, we do see people in the Bible cursing people, but they had the authority. They had a word from God, and what they said came to pass. You are just wishing evil on someone because you got a problem with for whatever reason. That is not okay. That is not right. That is inappropriate. I do not have the ability to send someone to hell. I do not have the ability, the authority to damn anyone's soul to hell. Jesus Christ does. You better believe he has that authority. You better believe he has the ability to do that. And so if he does that, if he puts that curse, then that is okay. He has the authority to do it. You could say that a judge often has the authority to curse someone. If they condemn someone to death, if they pronounce the death penalty on them, how is that not a curse? You better believe that's a curse. But they also have the authority to do that. Again, that random stranger that you cussed out because he cut you off in traffic, what authority do you have to curse him? And is anything that you said going to happen to him? No, it's not going to happen. Okay? It's not going to happen to him because God doesn't recognize your self-proclaimed authority. So you are wrong. And so there's a big difference between someone who has the authority to put a curse, the power to put a curse on someone, and someone who is just doing it out of their mouth, just wishing evil. That is not the same thing. There's a big difference between God and you. There's even a big difference between David, who was a king, who had the authority to fight battles, who had the authority to put people to death. There's a big difference. Okay. And so I said, I don't have the authority to damn someone. And so me just wishing it, hoping God agrees with me. That's the very definition of cursing, and that's not right. Let's look at a biblical example, too, of someone cursing. All right, let's go look at a place in the Bible where David gets cussed out, literally gets cussed out. In 2 Samuel 16:5, and when David came to Bahurim, behold, thence came out a man of the family of the house of Saul, whose name was Shimei, the son of Gera. He came forth and cursed still as he came. And he cast stones at David, and at all the servants of King David, and all the people, and all the mighty men were on his right hand and on his left. And thus Shimei, when he cursed, come out, thou bloody man, thou man of Belial. The Lord hath returned upon thee all the blood of the house of Saul, in whose stead thou hast reigned, and the Lord hath delivered the kingdom into the hand of Absalom thy son. And behold, thou art taken in thy mischief, because thou art a bloody man. Then said Abishai, the son of Zeruiah, unto the king, why should this dead dog curse my lord the king? Let me go over, I pray thee, and take off his head. So right there is an example. David is getting cursed out big time by this punk Shimei, who has no power, who has no authority, who hates David because he's from the house of Saul. He's jealous of David, and so he starts cursing him. Now, here's an interesting thing. Some of what he said in his cursing was true, but Shimei was in no position. He had no authority to curse David. This was something he was wishing on David and was happy to see coming on David because he had a personal vendetta against David. Because notice what David said in 1 Chronicles 22, because Shimei accused him of being a bloody man. He's saying all this stuff that's happening with Absalom right now is because you're a bloody man. Well, did you know that was actually true? In fact, 1 Chronicles 22:7, David said to Solomon, my son, as for me, it was in my mind to build an house unto the name of the Lord my God. But the word of the Lord came to me, saying, thou hast shed blood abundantly, and hast made great wars. Thou shalt not build an house unto my name, because thou hast shed much blood upon the earth in my sight. So David was a bloody man. Okay? And David was suffering by Absalom during that time because of the sin that David had committed with Bathsheba. David was kind of under a curse at that time, one that he had pronounced on himself when the prophet came to him and told him about the man that stole a sheep. And David said he's got to pay fourfold. And as a result, David lost 4 of his children. David went through some major battles because of that sin with Uriah. Now, where Shimei was wrong, he called David a man of Belial. He was definitely wrong there. David was not a man of Belial. David was a bloody man. David did some bad things. David was being judged by God during that time. But what's he doing? He's cheering it on because of a personal hatred that he has. And another example of people who did that, the Edomites, they got cursed by God because Israel was their enemies. And when Israel was taken over by the Babylonians, you know what the Edomites did? They cheered it on. They were glad to see it. Now, they were being punished by God. But because they were celebrating it, God's judgment. But again, their motivation was wrong. They weren't celebrating God's judgment because they just loved seeing God's justice being done. No, they were celebrating because they had a personal hatred for Israel, and God cursed them and has indignation on them forever because of it. That right there is not okay. And so again, there are people out there that they are in big trouble. They are under a curse from God, and we need to warn people about that. But am I going and saying, when I curse them, am I telling them the truth about what God said as a warning, or am I just cheering on destruction of my personal enemies? Okay, that's not right. Again, we ought to have a major problem with the enemies of God. I don't doubt that for a second. But we should also be honest with ourselves and say, do I hate them because they're God's enemies or because they're my enemies? And sometimes it's hard to tell because it's super easy to hate your own enemies, and we can deceive ourselves. And so when it comes to the biblical curse words, I believe we should use them the way the Bible uses them. Okay? And here's why you should use these words in a biblical way. Because one, we're not supposed to be offensive. And I remember one time we were having a Bible study at a high rise here in town, and one of the men in our church was answering a question. Somebody brought up a question. I don't even remember what it was exactly, but then man from a church, literally, he just went and quoted the verse in the Bible. It says, "If you receive not chastisement, whereof all are partakers, then are ye bastards and not sons." And this guy just couldn't believe that word was in the Bible, and we just like lost him after that. It was kind of funny, but it was kind of sad. And I remember the individual, he kind of felt bad. And I said, "Listen, you didn't offend him. The Bible did." I said, "You literally quoted the scriptures, and yes, people have been trained to be offended by that. And they shouldn't be, but understand too, just because that's a Bible word doesn't mean I should go around calling people that because I'm mad at them. Okay? That wouldn't be appropriate. So, this, that type of thing is, and listen, I'm fine with people asking questions and stuff on here, but don't put filthy cuss words in the chat, please. All right. Let's not defile anybody who might be watching this. Let's, at least abbreviate it or something like that. That was a filthy, disgusting word that doesn't need to exit anyone's mouth. But yeah, so we're not supposed to be offensive. So again, if I'm just being offensive, it's just me being offensive because I got mad at somebody and I called somebody a bad name. That's not okay. There are some words that should be used in reverence. Okay. We understand that, the name of God, it is a holy name. It is a wonderful name. We should use that with reverence. Okay. Because of what it represents, because of what it means, the name of Jesus. Obviously that's not a bad word, but you can use that word in an irreverent way, in an inappropriate way. And when you do, that's wicked. And let me tell you, there are, words like hell. Hell is a serious thing. It is the righteous judgment of God. And you have people today who pervert the word and say things like something is as wicked as hell, when hell is not wicked. Hell is the righteous judgment of God. You shouldn't say something like that. I heard somebody say one time that something was as cold as hell. What in the world? Okay. That's just you trying to be tough in your language or whatever. That doesn't even make sense. Hell is not cold. It is the absolute opposite of that. But people will say that, what the HE double hockey sticks. That doesn't make grammatical sense. That's you using offensive curse words. And hell is in fact a curse word. And so are you using it to curse someone, or are you using it explaining the truth of the Bible? When you're like, no, what does that even mean? Why are you even saying it in that way? That is not appropriate. Okay. And just because that word is in the Bible doesn't mean you now get to change its use to the perverted use that today's perverted society has. No, you need to use it the way the Bible uses it. So it still has meaning. So it still packs a punch. But unfortunately, you're not doing that. And so we don't want to weaken these words through misuse or even overuse. When you're just saying it all the time, you know what? When you name everybody as a reprobate, pretty soon nobody cares when you call someone a reprobate anymore. That's just always your go-to. You just immediately, when you just go to reprobate immediately, it doesn't mean anything. And so, we don't want to redefine these words and cause confusion. The Bible says in 1 Corinthians 14:8, "For the trumpet give an uncertain sound, who shall prepare himself to the battle? So likewise ye, except ye utter by the tongue words easy to be understood, how shall it be known what is spoken? For ye shall speak into the air. There are, it may be, so many kinds of voices in the world, and none of them is without signification. Therefore I know not the meaning of the voice. I shall be unto him that speaketh a barbarian, he that speaketh barbarian unto me." We want to speak in ways where people will understand us, where they will get the right idea. It's not enough that you are just technically accurate in what you said. No, you're trying to get a message across. And if people aren't understanding it, then you're not accomplishing anything. I can go preach a perfectly clear gospel to someone, but if they don't know English, it's not going to help them. I'm going to need different words to use. I'm going to need words from their language. Otherwise, I'm just speaking to the air. But what I'm saying is right. And the word of God has power. Yeah, of course it has power. But people need to understand it. And if they can't understand what I'm saying, I'm not going to accomplish anything. And so some words by themselves may not necessarily be evil, but it doesn't mean they should be spoken at any time. Okay? Even the Bible is discreet and it's careful about certain words that it uses. So for example, Deuteronomy 23:1, he that is wounded in the stones or hath his privy member cut off shall not enter into the congregation of the Lord. It uses the word privy. Why did it use that word? I mean, privy, that just means private. That could mean a bunch of different things. You know what? We know what he's talking about. It didn't need to be said in such explicit terms. And let me tell you, you know what? There's some body parts you don't need to go around talking about. But at the same time, there are places where you might need to talk about that. You know, if somebody has some kind of problem, they might have to go to a doctor, and they're going to have to talk to a doctor about certain things that are very personal and are very private. There are things, but it would be wrong if I'm just, right here on a live stream, I just start using graphic words, talking about graphic body parts, and then I try to accuse you of being a pervert because God's the one that made those parts. But listen, there's things that are private. If I got up as a pastor and while I'm preaching, I just start talking about the physical relationship with me and my wife, you would think I was a pervert if I got up and did that. And you know what? You would be right. But then I could gaslight you. Oh, the Bible says marriage is honorable and all, and bed undefiled. So therefore, everything was pure and it was of God. And you're pervert, you're wrong, you're a holier-than-thou for having a problem with me getting up and giving the gory details. No, there are some things that are appropriate only in certain situations. There are things I can talk about with my wife, but I can't talk about with somebody else. There's things I can't speak about publicly. Hey, folks, these things are just common sense. But what people do, there's preachers out there too, that's like they think it's hip and it's cool to just talk about their physical relationship with their wife and stuff, and they get it behind the pulpit and they get pretty graphic. Folks, these guys always turn out to be perverts. They always turn out to be perverts. And then, you try to call them out on it, and they'll go to the Bible. Well, the Bible talks about this stuff, But no, I'm telling you right now, there are some words where there are places and situations where it is appropriate to use those words, and there are other places where it is not appropriate, where it would be very wrong, where it would be sinful. There are some, there's something we don't speak of, things that they do in secret. Well, I'm just stating the facts. That's just what's going on. I shouldn't get up in my church when I'm preaching against homosexuality and get specific about what they do. That would be inappropriate. And you'd think I was a pervert if I did that. And I would be a pervert if I did that. There are some things it's a shame to speak of. And we don't need to say everything that there is to say. There's ways to get the message out without being inappropriate. The Bible talks about how he knew his wife. Why did it say it that way? It's being appropriate. Okay? It gets the message across. You don't need the gory details. And today, we have in our culture, in our society, when it comes to physical activity, there's all kinds of vulgar terms that people use. Or there's even words, and I'm not even going to use them, that people use that aren't bad words, but they'll use them in reference to physical activity with their wife. And I don't think we need to be talking that way. I shouldn't even use words that are not bad words, but I'm using them to describe private things. And you've got the F word, which is a very perverted word, that there is no context where that word is considered appropriate by any non-pervert. Okay. But there's other words that are used often in replacement of that one that aren't words that are bad words. But I shouldn't use those non-bad words in that way. I'm not going to get up and, wish some sexual act to be done on some man. whether I use the F word or use one of the other variations of that word. That is cursing. That is wrong. That is inappropriate. And don't let people sidetrack you with this stuff. There are some things that, again, in certain situations, it's fine to talk about. There's things that you can talk about between you and your wife. But let me tell you, as soon as you start talking about those same things around other people, you're a pervert. And you know what? You can quote marriage is honorable and all the bed undefiled all you want. You're a pervert, and everyone knows it. And you especially know it. So watch out for that kind of thing. Ladies, okay? Ladies, you need to be careful talking about details of your deliveries when you're around men. Okay? Listen, I've been there before where it's like conversations going on. And, I get it. Y'all are ladies and y'all have been through it. And I do. I don't think it's wrong for women to tell their birth stories and stuff like that. But sometimes, men, we don't need to hear about that. There's just some things I don't want to hear about. And I don't think it's wrong for ladies to get together and discuss some of these things, talk about some of the challenges that come from pregnancy and after pregnancy. That's fine for ladies to have those discussions. But you know what? Don't do it when a man's present. Don't do it when a young boy is present. Okay? It's called discretion. Okay? It's called discretion. And so if some lady in the church gets called out for getting really graphic about something that happened in her delivery, and she was talking in front of kids, she's talking in front of men about this kind of thing, all right, don't distract from the situation and be like, well, I don't see where it's a sin in the Bible to talk about, delivering a baby. I thought a baby was a blessing. Hey, discretion. There's a time and place where you can, and there's a time and place where you can't, and it would be very inappropriate for you to do that. I remember years ago at my last church, my dad, he was always really good at when weird stuff would happen in church, just kind of like moving on and acting like nothing happened, even though something really happened. I remember one time a guy in church, and these people were kind of weird. I don't think he meant anything by it. I think he was just clueless, but he like raised his hand in church for prayer requests, asking prayer for a procedure a medical procedure that his wife had coming up. And boy, I was sitting on the platform when it happened. You should have seen everyone's faces. And it was embarrassing. And, there's just, some things, use some discretion. Don't bring that up in front of everybody. Last thing you want is some little kid going home and asking Mom, Dad, I'm not going to repeat it. And listen, it's not wrong to have a medical procedure done. It's not wrong to go to a doctor when you're having a problem, but good night. Some things are private. Just say, my wife's got to go to the doctor, have a procedure done, pray that everything goes well. We don't need to know the details. We're not involved in it. And you're creeping everybody out when you do that. So, again, some things, they're not necessarily evil words, but they should not be spoken anytime, anywhere. So, also, too, there are some words that are in our culture that are used exclusively for things that are meant for cursing or being vulgar and profane. Without a doubt, the word profane, it means to violate anything sacred, to treat it with abuse, irreverence, or contempt, to profane the name of God, to profane the Sabbath, to profane the scriptures or the ordinances of God. We don't need to profane. We don't need to pollute the words of God, to defile. So to violate or to put to wrong use is another definition to profane. And when you're even taking biblical words and you're putting them to the wrong use, you're putting them to a worldly, vulgar, offensive use, you're profaning that word. That is profane speaking right there. And that is not good. That is not right. You shouldn't do that kind of thing. And there are words too that are exclusively used as just demeaning words. You have people, you bring up the one word that one guy cluelessly put in the live chat. I don't understand these people. And, so it's just a female dog. Well, you know what? Nobody uses that term for a female dog. And let me tell you too, again, these, people like demand that you have to give them a list of no words from the Bible, which is so stupid. But again, listen, every language, every culture has their words that are offensive, that has their words that are for cursing. And it's going to be different. It's going to be different at different times. It's going to be different in different places. There are words that at one time maybe weren't a cuss word and now are a cuss word, or vice versa. Those things can change. At the end of the day, it's not about finding a command that says, thou shalt not use this word. It's about not being offensive. And you say, well, sin's a transgression of the law. Well, let me ask you this. Does that mean only the Old Testament law? Does James count when it's saying out of the same mouth proceedeth blessing and cursing? These things ought not so to be. Does that count? Am I allowed to use New Testament? Because there's a lot of New Testament verses about speech, about using, about being profane. There's a lot about that. But no, you're moving the goalpost and saying, no, it has to say cuss word, because cuss and curse aren't the same for whatever reason. And it's got to give a list of the words. But then you would declare them all good and righteous and use them however you want. Like, people will take a word that the Bible uses. The Bible uses the word piss, which, we understand that's urine, but then they'll use it to explain them being angry. How is that a biblical use? Oh, it's a Bible word. Well, your usage of it isn't. Yeah, I get it that the Bible calls a donkey an ass, but that doesn't mean you can use that to talk about somebody's backside. What is wrong with you? Hey, you are perverting, you are profaning the words of God, because you're justifying your use of it based on the fact that it's the words of God. The words of the Lord are pure words. Then use them the way the Word uses them. Use them the way the Lord uses those words. Don't use it the way the perverts use it. Don't use it the way Hollywood uses it. This is real common sense, folks. And let me tell you something. I don't put up with this stuff. We don't do biblical cussing in our church from our pulpit. Somebody ever did that, they're not going to be preaching again, especially when they know better. It's not going to happen. And again, there's some people, they might use some of those words in ways that I necessarily wouldn't. And and I'm not, going to, I've got my lines, that I draw. Somebody can use some of these words a little freer than I can, and I'm not going to hate them for it. But, there are some words that there's no excuse to use. There's no reason to use the F word. There's no reason to use a lot of these other words, the S word, the F word, or B word, things. There's no reason for that. There's nothing edifying. Okay. There's nothing expedient. It's only offensive. People, often do it just for shock value, just trying to be a shock jock. That kind of thing is absolutely not okay. And so, the way you speak says a lot about you. Matthew 26:72, and again he denied with an oath, I do not know the man. And after a while came unto him that stood by and said to Peter, surely thou art one of them, for thy speech bewrayeth thee. And he began to curse and to swear, saying, I know not the man. And immediately the cock crew. Now let me ask you, what was it that gave away his, where he, his speech? They said, your speech bewrayeth thee. That word bewrayeth, it is an antiquated word, but it means to bewray or to betray or to show or make visible. So they're basically saying, I know where you're from because of the way you speak. And what that's specifically referring to, we can tell this from Mark chapter 14. They could tell by that he was a Galilean specifically. I know you're one of those ones, Jesus. You're a Galilean. That's what gave him away. And so he began to curse and swear because he got angry. He got scared. Okay? And I'm telling you, most of your cussers out there today are nothing more than scared individuals trying to look tough. That's all there is to it. And, again, you're not fooling anybody, absolutely not fooling anybody. But again, it identified him. And so our words, our speech, how we talk, there's the shibboleth story that's in the Bible. I remember one time I was in Kentucky and I was talking to a guy with a thick Southern accent. And he was like, doesn't sound like you're from the South. He knew I was from the North from talking to me. But then and then he's like, I'll bet you can't guess which state I'm from. And I said, I bet I can. And he's like, where do you think? And I said, Alabama. And he's like, how did you know? I was like, I can always spot the Alabama accent. I wish I had a Southern accent, but yeah, your speech gives you away. And so you can tell a lot about somebody by the words they speak, the way they use those words. And if you're just using filthy, vulgar profanity, you're telling me something. If you're bringing up not even just the words, but the subject matter, if you're always bringing up, sexual things and just, if you always, if the conversation always is going to certain body parts and things like that, I'm worried about you. I'm very worried about you because your speech, it bewrayeth you. And so, Jesus said, "O generation of vipers, how can you be evil, being evil, speak good things? For out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaketh. A good man out of the good treasure of the heart bringeth forth good things, and an evil man out of the evil treasure bringeth forth evil things. But I say unto you that every idle word that men shall speak." What's an idle word? I need a list of the idle words. Okay. We understand it's not about a list of words. Okay. I think you all get that. I hope I don't have to explain that to you. There's such a thing as idle words. So every idle word that men shall speak, they shall give an account thereof in the day of judgment. For by thy words thou shalt be justified, and by thy words thou shalt be condemned. And let me tell you, when people start pushing the boundaries, when it comes to their language, when it comes to their subject matter, they are typically just revealing they are perverts and groomers, and especially groomers. Okay, most people have enough self-awareness to know when it's appropriate to say certain things and to bring up certain things. But like for example, in Hollywood, okay, Hollywood, you have always had, everybody knows perverts have always run Hollywood, and they have always pushed the boundaries. They're always trying to break the rules of what is appropriate. And they always start out doing it like they're doing it to be funny. That with cross-dressing. They used to do it just being funny. But that they're pushing the boundaries because guys aren't supposed to put on a dress. But you know what? They're always pushing. They're always just doing a little bit more. But you know what they're doing? They're doing it to get everyone used to it because they're perverted, because they're filthy. They've done the same thing with the language. It used to be a big deal when profanity would be used, when cursing was used. Everybody's familiar with the famous Gone with the Wind scene where he says he doesn't give a rip, but he uses a different term. And people threw a huge fit over that. But you know what they did? They got in little by little. And now people don't even care. And let me tell you, we have been groomed into accepting perversion across the board. We have been groomed into accepting just verbal perversion, filthy language, filthy communication. You have been groomed. It's kind of like, perverts. They're always grooming people. They're always pushing things, trying to prepare people. Jack Scott, okay, he was an example too of somebody we know. We now know he was a pervert, but he was doing things to signal he was a pervert before with some of the things that he wrote about the Lord's Supper. It's like, dude, this, first off, not only are you wrong, but you are really crossing a line in your subject matter here. He's grooming people. When he was up in church polishing his shaft, you can't show me a verse in the Bible that says you can't polish your shaft and make weird noises while you're preaching. Nope, I can't. You got me. I can't show you a verse that says you can't polish your shaft and make weird noises while you're preaching. But let me tell you something. We all look back at that and we're like, how did people not know? And a lot of people knew. But here's the thing. He was a groomer. Okay? And a groomer is someone who builds relationships, trust, and an emotional connection with a child or a young person so they can manipulate, exploit, and abuse them. That's the definition of what a groomer is. Okay, they're building that relationship. And that's why too, a pastor, they have a connection. They build this connection. They build trust. They do all these things for people. And let me there's been a lot of groomers in pulpits over the years. Read Brother Shiflett's book about wolves among lambs, and you will see examples of groomers, guys who preach good things, but then they did behind the scenes, they're pushing things. And a lot of these people, they get so bold, they even do it publicly, just always pushing things, just defiling. We're going to get you used to it. We're going to get everybody used to it. Why? Because they're perverts. They're perverts is all there is to it. And they do these things. They build that trust. They build that relationship because they've got something they want. They're going to manipulate you. They're going to exploit you. And they reveal themselves when out of their mouth is coming all this guile and all this deception and all this perversion. And then especially too, when they try to build biblical precedent for, what they're doing, try to act like somebody calling them out as being a holier-than-thou when they don't know what one is, trying to act like that you're against Jesus and you're against, obviously that is ridiculous. That is gaslighting. That is what these people do. And so again, even though I've given all these clear common sense reasons for why people shouldn't use foul language, you will still have people be contentious and say, because there's a verse that doesn't say thou shalt not use this word in English in 2023, 22, it still isn't wrong. But let me bring up a passage for you. All right. What if I told you, all right, I'm going to say something now. What if I told you to show me a verse that says it's wrong for a man to have long hair? I mean, sin's a transgression of the law. You got to show me in the law. Show me in the law where it's wrong for a man to have long hair. Show me in the law. Shut up about 1 Corinthians 11. I said the law. Sin's a transgression of the law. Okay. Let's go to 1 Corinthians 11:13. Judging yourselves. Now, this is specifically talking about a woman praying uncovered, meaning not under authority. And it says, is it comely for a woman to pray unto God uncovered? Doth not even nature itself teach you that if a man have long hair, it is a shame unto him? But if a woman have long hair, it is a glory for her hair is given her for a covering. But if any man seem to be contentious, we have no such custom, neither the churches of God. Now, this is where people will go to prove that it's wrong, that it's a sin for a man to have long hair. But he doesn't even say that the law teaches it. He says nature teaches it. And while he's specifically pointing out the fact that a woman who has long hair, has it, that is representative of a covering, he's dealing with this idea of a woman praying not under authority. And he's saying that that's not a good thing. But notice how he says, if any seem to be contentious. Why? Because I need a Bible verse. I need something from the law. But notice what he said. We have no such custom, neither the churches of God. And that's something the trendies will do all the time. They will start some weird new trend, try to start some weird new thing that no one's ever done. You got to show me a verse in the Bible that says I can't do this. Well, there's something to be said about the fact that no church has ever done it. And let me tell you something, when it comes to, people trying to justify cussing and things like that and just filthy, vulgar language, you know what? I've never known any IFB people that were okay with that. I grew up in a pastor's home. Do you know, I'm not lying. I never heard my dad cuss. Never. I never one time heard my dad cuss. I heard preachers a couple times use some biblical words in ways that pushed it. Specifically, ones in relation to donkey that I'm like, you're pushing it, buddy. One time I heard somebody use hell and I was like, I wouldn't have used it like that, But, there are some words that are like the exclusive profanity ones. This is brand new teaching that kind of thing is acceptable. Listen, no church, no good church, no godly individual has ever taught any such thing. And you know what? Somebody can come along and declare it no longer a sin and even cause a lot of people to change their minds and to quit preaching what was always preached, but it doesn't change reality. And you know what? I have no respect for the use of profanity. People use profanity, no respect at all. I will be kind. I will be patient with people who are working on it and who are trying to improve. If we have some person, working around the church stubs their toe and, they're not used to this new way of life yet and they accidentally say something, I'm going to correct them, but, I'll be kind. I'll still be friends with that person. But when somebody knows better and they do that, I said, I remember, kids often do that. They got to show everybody what they're allowed to do. And you know what? that never worked around me growing up. Because one, if I would have hung around somebody that was using profanity and I didn't say anything about it, my parents, they would have been all over my case. So it was one of those things. You never impressed me by using profanity. I never, I didn't look at anybody with respect or like, wow, I can't believe you said that. You're so edgy. You're so tough. No respect at all. And watch out for groomers. Watch out for people who want to push these kind of things and who just can't seem to have common sense. There are some things that have their place, and when you speak those things out of place, you are very wrong in doing that. I think this is all common sense. We had a lot more scripture we could have went to, but I've already gone long on this. So I hope this was a help and a blessing to everyone. And I know everybody's wanting me to talk about a situation, but you know what? Why give more attention to those who love and live for attention? Thankfully, when it comes to certain situations, I had already broken fellowship and moved on before these things took place. And so I don't even feel it's necessary to necessarily, make a big public, show and add another episode to the soap opera. I'm not really interested in that kind of thing, but I do want to make sure it's very clear in my church. I want it very clear with people who listen to me and follow me that profanity is completely unacceptable. It is wrong. I don't just think it's wrong. I don't just personally have a problem with it. It's wrong. Okay. End of story. There is no debate. Okay. There is the truth, and then there is rebellion against the truth. And so hopefully this will help you understand some of these things. In reality, hopefully you didn't learn anything. I think everybody should have known everything we were talking about in here. But just in case, if there is any who seem to be contentious, go find that, other, group of churches out there, that are preaching the truth and practicing just foul-mouthed profanity. See where you can find that in history. Not there. And, but anyway, I appreciate y'all watching this, and I hope y'all have a great new year. We'll see y'all next time.